So from now on, let us discuss cooperative tasks jumping through time and space, starting with the session 1. This will be moderated by the Honorary Professor, Seoul National University, Lee Hyung-ju, who is the advisor for the Future Forum of the Korea Health Functional Food and has been served as the president of Korea Food Safety Research Institute. Oh, I will take over the microphone of Professor Lee. Would you please start the session?
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you all to the keynote address session of this conference. My name is Hyung-ju Lee, Professor Emeritus of Food Science and Biotechnology, Seoul National University, and I am privileged to chair this session of keynote address. The theme of the session is Post-COVID-19 Strategy for the Global Functional Foods Industry. The current pandemic of COVID-19 compels us to modify every part of our life with the unprecedented solutions. 3 eminent speakers are invited to discuss the strategy for the future functional food industry. Dr. David Heber, chairman of the Overlife Nutrition Institute USA, and Dr. Yang Cho, Vice President of Amway Korea, and Dr. Sujin Cho, CEO of ACE1RS USA. Since the conference is running on a very tight schedule, it's unfortunate that only brief introduction of the prominent speakers can be given. But please remember that the detailed CV is appeared on the conference homepage. I also like to ask lecturers to keep the talk time of 20 minutes. One more thing, the discussion will be open after all the 3 presentations is finished. Okay, let's now move to the first presentation. The first speaker is Dr. David Heber, who is the chairman of the Overlife Nutrition Institute and Professor Emeritus of Medicine and Public Health at the David Geffen School of Medicine at University of California, Los Angeles. Dr. Heber's title is The Future Direction of Functional Food Post-COVID-19. Dr. Heber.
Thank you. It's a great honor to be introduced here at this Food Polis conference on functional foods. It's a great honor to be with you here in Korea, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about what I'm going to be speaking about today. So today we're going to be talking about the future direction of functional foods post-COVID-19. The objectives of this lecture are first to discuss with you the relationship between the immune system and key factors in the context of COVID-19, the relationship between the immune system and nutrition, plant-based diets and their benefits for immune health, and the future of functional health foods, and then I'll summarize the key takeaways of my presentation. Now, we've all seen this figure of COVID-19, and on the viral surface, those red proteins are called spike proteins. They bind to a protein on the surface of lung cells called the ACE2, or angiotensin-converting enzyme 2. Electron microscopy studies have revealed the structure of the binding site on these proteins and the part of the virus that binds to it on cells. There are more of these ACE2 proteins in fat cells than in lung cells. Obesity, diabetes, and high blood pressure, as well as advanced age, are risk factors for present and future viral infections and pneumonias. So obesity and diabetes are a key problem in Korea. In 2018, the prevalence of obesity among Korean men was 42.8%, and among women it was 25.5%. This is the highest percentage in the last 20 years, and as with the global obesity epidemic, is due to increased calorie intake, especially of high-fat, high-sugar foods, and reduced physical activity. The 2018 Korea National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey found the prevalence of diabetes among adults 30 years or older was 13.8%, and the prevalence of diabetes among adults 65 years or older was 27.6%, nearly 1 in 3. So let's talk about aging and immune function. There are many factors both within your body and in the environment that affect immune function as you age. On the upper part of this slide are shown the factors within your body that affect immune function. Reduced muscle mass, also called sarcopenia, is something you want to avoid. Muscle has many metabolic functions, including support of the immune system. Skin atrophy and wrinkling, which occurs with aging, allows bacteria to get through the skin more easily. There's reduced immune responsiveness to antigens, whether a vaccine or an infection. An elderly person may generate fewer immune cells and less antibody protein. There's reduced function of the mucosae, the lungs and airways, providing less protection against airborne infections. And there are genetic changes of aging that make the immune system less effective. On the lower part of the slide are environmental factors, some of which you can control, including diet and physical activity. You can avoid frailty with regular exercise, reduce stress with good sleep and meditation. You can manage your pharmacological treatments to both prevent disease and enhance health, and you can try to avoid comorbid illnesses. Now, in Korea, there's a very aging population. The life expectancy in Korea is 82.7 years. This puts Korean aging in the top 5 among OECD countries. Only 29.5% of Koreans over 15 years of age perceive their state of health as good, which is the lowest among OECD countries. 9 out of 10 adults in Korea consider maintaining good health as essential, but only 6 out of 10 actually make the effort to keep good health. The health functional food market reached $4 billion in 2019, up by 3.5%. That's 2.9 trillion KRW in 2015. How do you measure age? Well, chronological age, the number of years you're on this earth, don't generally correlate with biological age, as two people may be of the same age but differ in their mental and physical capacities. Each nation and government have different ways of classifying age, and divisions are sometimes made between the young old, between 65 and 74, the middle old, between 75 and 84, and the oldest old over age 85. Aging does proceed at different rates in individuals, and this was shown in this study from New Zealand called the Dunedin study, in which 1,000 healthy adults aged 26 years were followed for the following 12 years until they reached the age of 38. What they found was some individuals aged at 1/2 the rate of others, while others aged at 2 times the average. This was based on 14 different parameters measured while they aged, shown in the lower part of the slide, including forced expiratory volume from the lungs, hemoglobin levels, lipid levels, exercise capacity, and many other functions that related to the biology of aging. And this study clearly shows that some people age at different rates. And what was very interesting in this study is there was also faster aging of the face. Photographs of the 1,000 individuals were provided to judges who were not told the age of the individuals. They were asked to guess the age. And in fact, their guess of the age correlated very well with the biological markers. And this is explainable as follows, because with aging, the skin loses collagen and elastin. And this results in wrinkling, a common problem with aging that is accelerated by smoking and excessive sun exposure. But taking collagen supplements can help to reduce the loss of collagen in the skin. And this is what's known as a collagen hydrolysate. Now, proteins, other proteins are very important for immune function. With protein malnutrition, less critical immune proteins are made, including antibodies called immunoglobulins that bind to viruses and prevent their entry into cells. Malnourished individuals getting inadequate protein in their diet also have a poor antibody response to the vaccines. These reductions in immune cell number impair immune responses. Many population studies have shown loss of immune function during malnutrition. And this explains the increased susceptibility to many kinds of infection in malnourished individuals, including infections with influenza, tuberculosis, bacterial and viral pneumonias, and gastrointestinal infections. So the biology of aging is somewhat complex. It is all under the rubric of inflammaging. That is a natural inflammation driven by excess body fat in the abdomen called inflammaging. This results in DNA damage, release of proteins called pro-inflammatory cytokines, oxidative damage, loss of brain cells and other cells, and reduction in immune function, as we have discussed. This can be seen in the muscle with abnormal mitochondria, the energy factories in the muscle, which release oxygen radicals, accelerating the rate of aging. And we'll talk more about that in a few moments. Abdominal obesity is very common in Korea and throughout Asia. Abdominal obesity results in excess body fat being located around the intestines where 70% of the immune system is found. Even when body weight is normal, you can have excess internal abdominal fat. This internal abdominal fat leads to increased inflammation, oxidative stress, and tissue damage to many organs in the body, including not only the immune system, but the eyes, the kidney, the skin, the lungs, the brain, the heart, and the joints through arthritis. What you can do to counter the oxidative stress is to eat a colorful plant-based diet. More people than ever are eating plant-based diets with colorful vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. This is different than a strict vegan or strict vegetarian diet where animal products are completely eliminated. But in this diet, you can eat small amounts of animal products as well, but base the diet largely on the 7 color groups. It includes salads and special vegetable-based proteins in meals, including combinations of beans, nuts, and whole grains. Desserts are easy to make with fresh or frozen fruits. And soy protein meal replacement shakes are an excellent choice to be sure you're getting all your needed protein and micronutrients. I summarize these findings in 2 books called What Color is Your Diet and The LA Shape Diet, both of which are available in Korea. Muscle health is the next topic I'd like to discuss. We've mentioned it briefly as one of the problems with aging and immune function. And maintaining muscle requires both nutrition and exercise as you age. Now, muscle does not store protein. When you eat a meal, the amino acids are the building blocks of protein. They're broken down from the protein. They rise in the blood. And when their concentration in the blood is greater than in the muscle, they enter the muscle where they stimulate new protein synthesis. Between meals, as shown in the lower part of the slide, amino acids are released from the muscle. So you must have the proper amount of protein, not only every day, but at every meal. The importance of exercise is also shown on this slide. When you exercise, you stretch your muscle fibers, leading to a mild inflammation, which attracts satellite cells, which fuse with your muscle, making it larger and stronger. And here you can see me practicing push-ups in the gym, one of the exercises I do to maintain my muscle age. So exercise can help to reduce the loss of muscle with aging. Shown in the upper part of this slide is the loss of muscle, which results in disability in elderly individuals who do not exercise. However, if you exercise with resistance training and aerobic training, you can reduce this rate of muscle loss. Shown in the bottom part of the slide is one of the reasons why. With high-intensity interval training and resistance training, you can keep the mitochondria, the small energy factories in your muscles, healthier so that they release less in the way of oxygen radicals, and there's a reduced loss of muscle. Now, immunonutrition is also influencing protein in the intestine around the immune system. So 70% of the immune system is located around the intestine where nutrients work to stimulate the growth of your gut bacteria known as the microbiome. These 14 trillion bacteria digest what your body does not and produce a number of substances which circulate in the system and promote immune health. So immunity is lost with severe protein deficiency through the breakdown of the protein barrier shown on this slide, separating the immune system underneath the intestinal villi from the intestinal contents. So the foods you eat determine the bacteria in your microbiome, which in turn affects your immune system. And I wrote about this in a professional textbook called Immunonutrition on the Interactions of Diet, Genetics, and Inflammation in 2014. Foods that help immune function are foods that contain protein, phytonutrients, including fiber and polyphenols. Now, botanicals have always been popular ingredients in functional foods for health. Many are known to have health benefits, including supporting immune function and relieving upper respiratory tract infections. As self-care is becoming the new normal, there will be a greater demand for botanicals with a strong history of use, as well as scientific evidence from clinical trials, as shown here for ginseng and echinacea. Now, fish oils are an important part of the diet. In ancient times, when mankind evolved on a plant-based diet, there was a balance of so-called omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids. However, in the last 200 years, the addition of large amounts of vegetable oil to processed snack foods has increased the amount of omega-6, resulting in a huge imbalance, resulting in pro-inflammatory substances like prostaglandins, leukotrienes, and thromboxanes, shown in the red square on the slide. On the other hand, omega-3 fatty acids, which come from flaxseed and other plants, are converted to eicosapentaenoic acid. However, the human body is relatively inefficient in doing this, so it's beneficial to take the eicosapentaenoic acid, the long elongated fatty acid in this series, directly with fish oil supplements or eating ocean-caught fish. These supplements contain EPA and DHA, eicosapentaenoic acid and docosahexaenoic acid. These lead to anti-inflammatory smaller molecules, prostaglandins, thromboxanes, and leukotrienes, shown in the green square at the bottom. Now, if you want to add extra fat to your diet, after reducing the total amount of omega-6 fat and increasing omega-3, you can add olive oil or avocado oil. These are neutral omega-9 oils that do not affect the omega-6, omega-3 balance, but still have 140 calories per tablespoon, so you want to be careful with these. Your body fat reflects over time the fat that you eat, and healthy fats support immune function. Now, the future of health functional foods will be to promote better health in the post-COVID-19 era. Consumers will look for health functional foods that support not only immune health, but support the structures and functions that help to support immune responses. Shown in the upper part of this slide is the protein challenge, not only from fish and animal sources, such as chicken and beef, but from many types of plants, maize, rice, soybeans, wheat, all grown through sustainable agriculture. And people are even looking at some insect sources of protein in the future. Manufacturers of health functional foods that are industrial products are present now, including symbiotics similar to kimchi and nutraceutical supplements, in addition to the animal and plant foods we've already discussed. So manufacturers of health functional foods will be asked to consider the environmental impact while safeguarding public health and providing health benefits. Future health functional foods will use more land-efficient alternatives for animal source ingredients, and if produced with renewable energy, they will provide greenhouse gas benefits for the planet's climate. So here are my key summaries from today's address. Health functional foods will be much more focused on immune health post-COVID-19. This pandemic has made clear our personal responsibility to control and manage our obesity and obesity-associated diseases that are more common with aging, including diabetes and hypertension, to maintain immune health. Obesity, diabetes, and high blood pressure often are risk factors for present and future viral infections and pneumonias. Beyond filling nutrient gaps, health functional foods will seek to promote health through optimal nutrition for physical and psychological well-being, including optimal performance, healthy aging, and the prevention of muscle loss or sarcopenia with aging. So thank you very much for your attention today, and I'll be happy to answer a question. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Heber, for your excellent talk, including the Korean statistics for the metabolic syndrome incidences. And you emphasized the importance of the immune health and the post-COVID-19 era. Okay, now we are going to move to the next lecture. The next lecture will be given by Dr. Yang-Yi Cho. She is the vice president of the Amway Korea, and before she joined the Amway, Dr. Jo had worked over 10 years as researcher at the Korean Health Industry Development Institute, which is the government-established organization. Dr. Jo's title is Industrial Trend of Nutraceuticals R&D. Dr. Jo, please.
네, 교수님 감사합니다. 어쨌든 한국 오디언스가 많은 관계로 저는
Because I believe that there are more Korean audience than foreigners, I would like to use Korean for my presentation.
이런 주제를 가지고 중요한 컨퍼런스에
It is my pleasure and privilege to join this important and timely conference, which talks about one of the most important topics of this time. Just like Dr. Heber shared earlier, whether it's before COVID or after COVID, he mentioned all the things that science has to focus on. It was a little bit broad, but also very specific. It was a very well thought out and well planned presentation, all in all. And now it is time for us to talk about how this industry, the food functional industry, is going to change in the future. Today, through my presentation, I'm going to talk about what are some agenda that we need to face after COVID-19. It could be a high-level questioning. It could be a topic that is general, which also covers how the general society will change in the future. Now we need to look at the changes that COVID-19 brought. Do you think what we did yesterday, before COVID, can be enjoyed in the future? I can surely say that we won't be able to live the same way. We might go back and do something similar to what we did before, but it will never be the same. But when I came to Iksan today, I had to wear a mask. But before, it wasn't a mandatory activity. It wasn't a common activity. That is why we are talking about a new world after COVID-19. And that is why we are talking about the new normal that this virus will pose. And we are now here sitting together, and we have homework to talk about how the future will be like. If someone asks me what would be the biggest change after COVID-19, I would say speed. Unlike the past, I believe things will be done in a very speedy manner. And Microsoft also said that digital transformation will happen over 2 months instead of 2 years. And it's also said in the future, things will be done 10 times faster, 300 times bigger, and 3,000 times stronger. In order to cope up with this speed, people will rush, and many people will fail in the process. So when you call a success, people who manage to minimize and reduce failures will be the ones who will succeed in the end. That is why we need to read how consumers will change. Without reading how consumers will change, we won't be able to come up with successful product development. We need to be able to define consumers in the following 3 ways. After COVID-19, we conducted market research, and this is the result from the survey. After COVID-19 broke out, everyone panicked, and people did not know how to get out of this panic. It is a time of confusion, and that is why we came up with this keyword, reset. We need to think about how we're going to protect our loved ones from this dangerous bacteria and germs. So people are more concerned and conscious about daily hygiene. Secondly, after we get out and break free from germs and harmful bacteria, we need to think about how we're going to care for our family and friends in this dangerous settings. And also, eating or consuming food is totally changed as well. When you think about food consumption, the old way won't apply. The old way of eating will reduce, and we will have to reinterpret how we eat. We need to think about new cooking methods and new cooking recipes. We're going to go through trials and errors, and after this confusion, I believe that people will be able to accept the new normal and the new reality. I would call this stage the stage of acknowledgement. And during this acknowledgement stage, people will try to keep their own balance. And the key word during the process will be health. In the past, there will be many different elements of daily lives, and you did not really think about your health. But now, health became the most important element of your life, and it'll be attached to every thinking and thought process. From now on, young millennials or Generation Z are already very interested in social corporate responsibility, but this brand loyalty will be much more strengthened after the COVID-19 outbreak. And because things will become digital, new consumer groups and targets will appear. They will reinterpret the existing values, and you have to be able to read it accurately and precisely. Without this analysis, you won't be able to succeed in the future industry. And after these two major processes, you will try to now then redefine what you have done. You will now sit down and look at things with a new lens. You will try to overcome and control your surroundings. You will create your own at-home rituals. Individuals have to come up with their own creativity. You are going to be exposed to many different materials and data, and you will apply your own reinterpretation skills and creativity. This will be the main element of the new era. And I believe that life and work balance will become more and more important, because non-contact environments are going to be much more prevalent in the future. And last but not least, people will focus on online shopping. And you have to think about how you're going to interact with digital brands as a consumer. Based on all these consumer-oriented trends, we are going to have to apply new direction for health supplement product development. We need to think about immunity, but people think immunity in a very different way. Let's say you talk to a random person. What do you think immunity is? Every single person will come up with different answers. That is why Dr. Hibber said that mechanism is very complex and complicated, and using that complex scientific elements to product development is not going to work. You need to interpret those complex science into a more intuitive and simple mechanism so that consumers can better understand about the efficacy of specific products. We need to utilize and apply modern science because that's where consumers will be most interested in. That is why Chinese medicine is actively utilized in product development recently. And this is a great example of how people are now looking into alternative or a little bit different technology and approach when it comes to boosting immunity. The Chinese government is now aiming to lead the world global food market utilizing the Chinese and Oriental medicine, and I think their approach is very adequate and timely. It's going to be very successful. And now we have to think about back to nature. From production to manufacturing, all the logistical process, throughout all value chains, people require traceability in a more rigorous manner. And as you can see, in the West, clean labels are becoming more popular, and this trend will continue and spread as well. Now you need to think about how you're going to launch your own clean labels as a company. And also, what I would like to emphasize next is the consumer experience journey. Health supplements or functional foods are food. It's not a medicine. That is why we need to think of the journey, the consumer journey, and technologies related to this journey of improving consumers' life are being developed. For example, we have to specifically deliver target materials, and there are related slow release mechanisms such as single layer or double layer. There's also a technology called gum plus chewable. You can see many different technologies that are listed on this specific slide. There are also a way to break down different elements in order to increase absorption rate in human body. And we also use a capsule-in-capsule mechanism so that two different characteristics can be combined together without affecting one another. This is to deliver efficacy, and after calculating all the intended delivery time in consumers' bodies. Utilizing this technology, the market will go through a transformation. However, this will be difficult in Korea. Korea has a government-oriented, government-driven approach instead of letting the private market lead these changes. That is why the Korean government needs to do this homework of how to employ and implement new technologies in the food industry. Technological changes, industry changes, and trend changes are being expedited. And we need to think about what next to do as the industry leaders. All experts will say that we need to focus on globalization. How we're going to enter the global market. The Korean market increased from 4 trillion won to 5 trillion won in terms of its size. How we're going to go global. This is the homework we need to do, and we need to be able to utilize Korean power. And that is why I wanted to come up with a few bullet points that I want you to look at. Number one would be K-power. K-immunity and K-culture are now leading the globe, and I think Korean citizens played a big part in the whole movement. Koreans have been very actively involved in globalizing Korean culture, and Korea has a culture where consumer protection is strictly respected. Korean consumers are the most picky groups, and we also have the smartest group of people as well. More than 80% of high school graduates go to universities, and this is unprecedented in the world. That is why I think instead of trying to compete against other countries or Korean citizens, we have to think of ways to cover and include all these people. The company that I work for is a global unicorn company, and Herbalife, where Dr. Harper belongs to, is also a global powerhouse. That is why we need to utilize global expertise and knowledge. And by utilizing the knowledge that are accumulated overseas, we will be able to not only attract Korean consumers, but other foreign consumers as well. Instead of focusing on our own domestic market, we need to think out of the box. We have to have an open-minded attitude, and by being equipped with these elements, we can take the lead in the global food industry. We need to build a globalized ecosystem, and this is what everyone can easily assume. So now we need to think about how we're going to build the ecosystem. Good and virtual ecosystem can guarantee sustainable growth. What I would like to focus on here is global insight. Without global insight, nothing can be achieved. I worked in Korea for more than 10 years, and I also worked and lived abroad for more than 10 years. In order for us to be globally informed, you need to form a global network. And it takes time to nurture and spread and expand global networks. That is why you need to utilize existing global network that you possess. And the government can play a key role in terms of shaping such global networks. Without the global leadership of the Korean government, you won't be able to utilize the benefit. That is why the government should think about the leadership more than a partnership. Unlike the past, without science being the basis of food development, no one will be able to trust our products. Especially if you're talking about food and health functional foods, because these industry and these products face the strictest hurdles in the world, we need to be able to overcome such regulations. We need to now look back on current and existing regulations and rules that Korea adopted in the past. When these were first adopted, I would say it was a very accurate and fair movement. But now, because of these regulations, because of this rigid and strict regulations, companies are giving up developing new technologies and applying new technologies to the products. So now it's time for us to sit down and look back and think about easing such regulations. Now let me summarize my presentation. I think Korea has a very bright future when it comes to the global food industry market entrance. We are also faring very well. And this is the right time for us to think about consumer. We need to focus on consumers. And we also need the leadership of the Korean government. Consumer focus and as well as the government leadership have to go together. When these go together, we will think about consumer needs and consumer benefits, consumer efficacy. And after the COVID-19 pandemic, I hope that policymakers can think about these two factors so that they can come up with a holistic approach in the future. And for individual products, I wanted to make some emphasis on individual products, but because we do not have enough time, because I could not reveal some of the industry secrets and company secrets, I will skip that part. And I think many different consulting paper instead will deal with the part that I was originally going to deliver. I will keep my good work, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Presenting immune, phytochemicals, and globalization as keywords for the functional food industry and the post-COVID-19 years. Okay, the third and the final lecturer is Dr. Sujin S. Cho. She is the CEO of the ACE1 RS, a regulatory consulting firm in Maryland, USA. Before launching the firm, Dr. Zhou had worked more than 20 years at the Kellogg as Director of Nutrition, Nutrition Business Partner, Food Chemist, or Senior Scientist. And instantly, I found that Dr. Zhou and I are alumni of same University of Wisconsin-Madison, maybe more than 40 years ago. It's very nice to meet you, Dr. Zhou, at this conference. Dr. Zhou, please.
이영주 교수님께서 소개해 주신 대로 이영주 교수님하고는 한 40여 년 전에 유니버시티 위스콘신을 같이 다녔습니다. 그리고 오늘 프레젠테이션
I am the presenter. I'm Susan. Oh, well, just to give you some behind the stories. Well, I've studied with about 40 years ago. I studied with at the university, the Wisconsin University, about 40 years ago. So it's so nice to meet him again online. So today I would like to present on the new dietary ingredient NDI as well as GRAS determinations.
다큐멘터리고 그래스는 푸드 인그리디언트의 세이프티에 관한 서류입니다.
So these are the kind of the FDA that relate to the regulations as well as some documentations. When we say the food, FDA classifies the food into many different segments. So when we say the food, it is defined as the articles or components of articles used for food or drink for humans or animals. And the food additives are any substance that becomes a component of or affects the characteristics of the food. And in the United States is the highly popular and is in the high demand. Then today, well, I would like to draw the one first question. So what is the intended use of the ingredient? So the first, there are the two things that I would like to touch upon. That the dietary, the supplements food, they are only for dietary supplements and for addition to conventional food and possible dietary supplements. So we need to keep those two facts into the mind. And let's find out the path to market. So when there is an ingredient is proposed, then it is run the preliminary feasibility and the data gap analysis is run. Then some safety studies are being run if it is needed, and then after some of the safety documentations are prepared, and then so either the proposer can run the GRAS determination by experts or the NDI notification to FDA. It takes some time, so for the GRAS to get the notification to FDA, it takes about 6 months. For the NDI, it takes about 75 days. And then all those things are being done online. So for the GRAS notice, sorry for the misconnection.
맨데토리가 아니고 발런터리입니다.
So for there's one thing that you need to keep in the mind. So for the NDI, it is mandatory, but so that
What's wrong?
Yeah, please go ahead.
so there are two things that you need to keep in mind. For the grass, it is you can do it voluntarily, but for the NDI,
발런터리고 필수가 아닌데
it is not mandatory.
회사들이 그래서 노티스나 셀프 어컨트
But
하는 이유는
But the reason, even it is not mandatory, but a lot of the companies are willing to go through those kind of the process
수술 만들었는데 사고가 나면은
because just to prevent any kind of the risks because.
그 세이프티 다큐멘트를 갖고 오라고 합니다.
Because if in case any kind of the risks happens, then they might have to provide some kind of the safety related documentations, so that as a kind of the preventative the measures or as kind of the precautionary measures, they are willing to. A lot of the companies are willing to go through the GRAS or the NDI the process. The NDI, meanwhile, it can be done either the confidentially or the non-confidential or the publicly. So that is so if the proposer the requested to all those the documentation to be confidential, then you can run the entire process, or that you can keep your documentation in secret. And so that what it has is a good size and that it's a bad size, but because but since it is everything, so the entire process can be done in the confidentially entire before it is first marketed. So let's say it takes about 1 or 2 years, and then the process can be a bit complicated, and then so you might have to provide the entire the documentations as well, and you may also designate the consumption period. So let's say 3 months, but let's say generally it's about 3 months.
그레스는
For the grass,
1958년 1월 1일 전에 그 미국에서
it was
따로 특별히 서류를
for those documentations used in the before 1955, 58. Well, it was kind of a loose, but there are two different types of documentations used for the grass.
웨스턴 엑스퍼트 3명 이상이
And
사인을 하고
for the grass, that you need to you need to have all those documentations screened by the 3 experts, and then you need to get their consents. And then after you get the consents, and then you pre-submit all your documentations to FDA. But again, you need to keep in mind that all those the process can be done voluntarily.
예, 오케이. 바이타민, 미네랄, 아미노 애시드.
So
그리고 사람들이 좀 부족해서
but
더
there
먹어야
are
되는 거,
examples of the dietary ingredients such as the vitamins and minerals or herbs. or amino acids, or these are the kind of the examples.
10월 15일 전에 쓰였던 그 다이어트리 인그리디언트
But dietary ingredients that were on the list before the 1994, well, does not need to show is the proof, because that was a year that's the Congress made the revision.
몇몇 기관이 올드 다이어트리 인그리디언트
But after the year the 1994, there has been some the changes on this relevant regulation, so that all those ingredients have to be identified.
다른 의견을 냅니다.
And
그것은 FDA가 만든 리스트가 아니기 때문에
And then FDA, since then, says that
레코드, 세일즈 레코드, 매뉴팩처링 레코드,
you need to provide that, you need to, those manufacturing or the sales companies need to submit all those written business records, such as the sales records and manufacturing records or the commercial invoices.
똑같은 그 케미컬 컴포넌트라도
And then, if there's any the changes, the slight changes in this in the compositions or the ingredients, then you need to show the proof of it.
특성으로 만든 것도
And then,
인그리디언트로 인정을 해줍니다.
but
그리고 또 한 가지 NDI 조건은
and the NDI need to, but the ingredients with the drug claims or the subject of the IND or the NDR, they are not granted as the dietary ingredients, and then the ingredients in the non-conforming products are not granted, or the hormones or the other the non-dietary substances that are not identified.
케미컬리 얼터됐다고 합니다.
So that you need to also keep in mind about the chemically altering and then not altering processes.
그것이 ODI라고 볼 수가 없는 것입니다.
And
또 한 가지 예는 그 프리즈 드라이 정도는 되는데
and then you need to also keep in mind that what is the altering ones and then not the altering ones.
얼터됐다고 간주가 됩니다.
So the first one is whether it is a use of the solvents other than the water, or whether it's extraction with or the use of the water. And then whether it is using the high temperature, or whether it's what kind of the manufacturing method has been used, and whether there has been any changes and about the chemical compositions and etc. And
아니면은 그냥 저기 unmodified microorganism을 써가지고 식품자료를 많이 쓰는데
there are a lot of the cases that microorganisms are the substances are being used.
그런 것이 없다는 것을 증명을 해야 되고.
But if those kind of substances are being used, then all those manufacturers need to provide the proof of it. And then if those microorganisms are not included in the substance, then you also provide the proof of it.
그 필요한 데이터가
And
이제 mutagenicity, genotoxicity, acute toxicity.
And as you can see on this the screen, these the substances are the ones that are needed for the hazard identification.
chronic toxicity,
The
carcinogenicity 스타디도 필요하고 그 pharmacokinetic 스타디도 필요한데.
So that's, well, as you can see on the screen, that these are the kind of the substances that are needed. If it's more natural, then it is more ideal, and well, it is more ideal that if you have this. It is ideal if you can provide this animal data set, if not the human data, if not the human data set.
NDI나 그래스를 통과한 적이 없습니다. 근데
So
그 카시노겐을 다 정제를 해서 지금 현재 판매되고 있는 알로베라 그 제품에는 카시노겐이
So,
없어요.
for the carcinogen, well, so for the previous years, that well, it was very difficult to pass this NDI, for the NDI the qualification. But nowadays, but there are some cases that are past the standards.
그 여태까지 크레스가 통과된 적이 없습니다.
So.
우리가 뻔히 이거는 너무 좋은 것인데 하는 저기 인그리디언트가
So let's say that.
통과하지 못하는 경우가 꽤 있습니다.
So there are some the cases that many people perceive that this is a really good ingredient, but there are cases that cannot pass this the FDA the FDA tests.
필요한데 제가 여기서 한 가지 말씀드리고 싶은 내용이 있는데.
And then there's one thing that I would like to point out. And after in Korea, after the running the human test, well, as far as I know, it is a conventional that after running the test, people do not keep the blood or the urines. But I would like to emphasize that after running all those safety and tests, relevant tests, so and then a lot, I would like to emphasize that in some cases, it is necessary. So it might be necessary to keep all those kind of the remnants. And then, a lot of the people assume that if one of the products, that passed the efficacy test, then they assume that they would easily pass they would easily go to the final round, and the final round of the GRAS or the FDA NDI of the FDA. But there are many cases of the failures, so I would like to emphasize on this as well. So while I do a lot of the consulting, and then I also run a lot of the analysis of the various the many different firms. I found out that there are many cases that Australia, the samples are just provided to the customers. And in the case of the China, sending those samples are not the conventionally acceptable. That if requested, sometimes it is acceptable. So, but it seems like the keeping the storaging of those samples is not well. It's not happy. Well, it's not very conventional. But there are some of the universities that do store those samples. And then when do store, they do not. I would like to emphasize that they do not have to have this CRO. And I think that what's more important is that keeping those blood and urine samples is much more important. And then if you keep all those blood and urine samples, and you can use it for the further test. So that I think it's I would like to
서너 시간이면 다 돌릴 수가
So,
있어요.
because if you have this if you keep those blood and the urine samples, well, by using those auto samples, well, it will take only 3 to 4 hours, and then to test the 300 or 400 samples, and then well, it won't the cost that much money. So it is a cost efficient and timely effective. So I would like to ask you to keep this in mind.
그래서 NDI 노티스를 하다가
And then in the graphs and the notice,
비즈니스를 확장하면서
and then I also would like to tell you that we recently have
미국에서
expanded our business.
국가식 클레임을 하려면은 법적으로 웨스턴 서브젝트를 상대로
Our business, the scope.
있어야 돼요. 한국이나 일본에서
So,
실험을 해서
If you have done while I do those consulting, what I found out that, well, if you have done the test in your own country, such as in Korea or in Japan, well, it doesn't necessarily mean that your samples would pass the test in our country, which means in the United States.
이 세션 끝나고 하시던가
So,
나중에 이메일로 해주시면
for any other questions, please email me.
For your excellent overview on NDI, GRAS, and other claims in the USA, Europe, and Canada. I believe the information will give very helpful assistance to the developer of innovative functional ingredients. Now, since all the three presentations are over, I'd like to thank speakers again. And next, the session is open for the discussion. Actually, to save the time, many questions were collated at the registration table. Among them, 3 questions were selected. And I'd like to ask each speaker to provide 2 minutes answer to each question. So the first question goes to Dr. Heber. As you mentioned in the talk, consumers become more interested in augmenting their immunity. What would you suggest to this consumer's demand? Dr. Heber?
Well, thank you for that question. Functional foods and traditional foods can include probiotics and prebiotics together as found in kimchi to enhance immune function. Many flavonoid polyphenols from green tea and other botanicals can alter the microbiome and enhance immune function. Phytonutrients found in botanical dietary supplements and foods, including polyphenols and novel proteins, are at the cutting edge of nutrition science research and can be used together with well-established diet and exercise strategies to enhance immune function in the post-COVID-19 era. And I believe that is the future of health functional foods.
Thank you. And the second question is for Dr. Yang Cho. What would you think the advantage of so-called K-power and the global functional food market?
네, 이 K 파워를 저는 한 3가지 관점에서
I think we need to look at this from 3 different perspectives. As I already shared throughout my presentation, Korean consumer power created today's Samsung, today's LG, and also Emura Pacific, which is one of the large, globally proven cosmetic companies. So this means that Korean consumers are very demanding and strict and picky. That is why global companies are utilizing the Korean market as their test market. And this is making Korea more competitive in the global market. So if you look around, all around the world, there is not many places where the government provide adequate support, where the government is actively interested in providing support for the industry. The government is providing information, the government is providing regulations, but also is interested in developing the specific industry. the government is trying to give necessary support for the ones who would like to lead the market. And what is also important, thirdly, is the speed. You know, there is a culture called 빨리빨리 in Korea. We have agility. We are very quick to respond, and I would think that these traits and characteristics define so-called the K-power.
Susan Jo asked this. Some changes may arise in the regulation of new ingredients after the COVID-19. What would you expect the changes in NDI or GRAS policy?
Coronavirus has nothing to do with the FDA policy.
Well, Corona, I don't think that Corona will have a little impact or no impact on the FDA regulations.
This question came from the Korean participants, and he or she maybe doesn't understand the American system of the allowances or the NDI or GRAS policy. Thank you, anyway. Now, I'd like to conclude this keynote address session by thanking 3 superb speakers and also all the internet audience participated in this conference. I hope everyone overcome the COVID-19 successfully with functional food in the coming years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, the Professor Lee, and for the all speakers for sharing valuable information through the session 1.